that you found that the posters extremely interesting. My name's Annie Darby, and this is my colleague from NurseFirst cohort 2, Denise Suter. And what we actually want to do is just give an overview of how we as a group have found NurseFirst. And in a minute, Denise is just going to read some quotes that some of us as a group have actually said. I think that the first thing that I want to stress about NurseFirst, and I say that on behalf of the whole group, and including Justin, who unfortunately can't be here today, is that this is actually about improving the patient care, the quality and the experience of patients and clients. And ultimately, that's actually what this is all about. So I'll now hand over to Denise, who's going to do some quotes.
I've asked the NurseFirst people, what they thought of the course. So here's some of their quotes, and beware, Dave. There's some good ones, mostly good ones. I won't read people's names, but people will recognise what they've said. I've been privileged to meet such inspirational people who are firmly grounded in their beliefs. This course has been an inspiration to me. Just turn it over. This course has been career-changing. So much help, advice, direction, and a real dose of entrepreneur passion has given me bucket loads of confidence and fresh energy for my future. Somebody's written, Chief Executives, beware. NurseFirst, thank you. I know now I can make a difference. Another person's written, this has been a life-changing experience for me. And somebody else has put, it's freed me to be me and how I'm meant to be as a nurse. Somebody else has put, this is career-changing, life-changing, motivational. The peer support has been the best ever. Just carry on. Somebody else has put, NurseFirst has given me wings. I've made friends for life. Another person's put, NurseFirst has been a positive experience on me. This has been the best course ever. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Anthony.
So it now actually falls from us as the NurseFirst group to actually thank all the NurseFirst team, including David, who again unfortunately isn't with us. You have brought us on a remarkable, extraordinary journey over the last year, just amazing. So we actually now have some tokens of our appreciation. So Ali, Holly, David and Agnes, if you'd like to come in.
Throughout the NurseFirst. So I would like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much.
Go, Dave, over to you.
Thank you.
Dave, we hope you got the flavor right of your...
Yeah, that's... I wasn't expecting that, so that threw me a little bit. Yeah, that's what happens when you delegate responsibility to people and go, yeah, go on, do it, be creative. I have no idea what you're going to do. It's lovely. Oh, thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed kind of going round and talking to people and looking at the posters and having a conversation with people about what they've done, because I think that really brings the NurseFirst programme to life. And it's certainly what we found last year, that says it's not so much about kind of us presenting ideas, but it's about talking to real people who are making a real change. clearly driven by wanting to make patient care dramatically better, but using a language that persuades it and the business case and the outcomes and bringing people on board. What I wanted to do, just for about 20 minutes, was to share some of our approach and some of our learning, because one of the things we're really committed to is to advance the development of clinical and social innovation anyway in the UK and abroad. And I think one of the ways you do that is you share what you do well, you share your mistakes, you share your outcomes, and you go, okay, this is what we want to do. You know, feel free to take these ideas and replicate them. So I think firstly I'd go, there's some things we know about innovation. We've done some research with clinical staff on innovation. One of the things we found was that when you ask NHS clinicians, what's the difficulty? What are the things that are really important to you in taking innovation forward? These were the top 5 they identified. The attitude of senior managers in their organisation, the attitude of middle managers in the organisation, having skills and knowledge for innovation, protected time, and access to senior managers. And I think one of the things that really struck me is money's not on that. And a lot of people assume that money is the problem. And even when you say to people, even in an era of cuts, there is still billions and billions of pounds going to healthcare, and there's a lot more money around than there is in just the NHS, and there's the third sector, and there's the private sector. And this is interesting that a lot of the time the solution is seen to be money. And some of the things we've identified as being really big issues are relatively solvable and don't really attract very much attention. So, for instance, one of the things is around access to senior managers. And for some people, they think, well, what's the problem? Well, this is some research we did with NHS clinicians. We said, how easy is it for you to access the chief executive of your own organisation? Round about a third said it was easy or very easy. Over a third said it was difficult, very difficult, or impossible. Now, 15% of people said it was impossible to meet the person who's the senior manager in the organisation, which, you know, as a former NHS chief executive, I'd be personally kind of quite disturbed by that. But often people don't realise that there are some of these really significant barriers to frontline staff just trying to get people on board with their ideas. And we know there's a classic middle manager problem. And this isn't to say that middle managers are trying to do this deliberately, or that they're bad people, or they're underskilled. But there's fundamentally a challenge if you're in the middle of an organisation, because you've got the board trying to push through efficiency savings, trying to hit really, really hard, challenging targets. And at the same time, you've got pressure from underneath going, we haven't got enough resources, we haven't got enough staff, we're getting pressure from the public. And you're squeezed in the middle. And for people that are massively squeezed between those two pressure points, it's actually really hard to go, let's open ourselves to innovation, let's open ourselves to creative and radical ways of solving things. So that is a real problem. And there is a problem with disconnected boards. Keith Pearson, the NHS Confederation Chair, said that leadership for innovation begins at the board. An empowering board is one that opens its eyes to the potential for innovation inside the organisation, outside the organisation, and in collaboration with other organisations. Staff are amongst the most impressive innovators when they're liberated to find new ways of doing things. So this is recognised at a very senior level in the NHS, that there is often a disconnect between boards and between frontline clinical staff. And so this is one of the things that we look to address on the NurseFirst programme. A lot of people think creativity and innovation is about ideas. And it sounds trite, but ideas are worthless. You get a bunch of people together, they go out for lunch, they sit in a bar, they have a couple of glasses, and they will generate loads of ideas. Most staff will generate loads of ideas really quickly. Idea generation in and of itself isn't the creative process, it's part of it. But the problem is around the execution. If you can't make the idea happen, then it just stays an idea. One of the things that really impresses me about the work that the participants do on the NurseFirst programme is they take the idea, they then work up the plans, and we know when we looked around at a lot of innovation programmes that they ended with, you know, the business plans and the proposals, which are important, but we go, no, we need to move beyond that into the really messy area of execution, where lots of things go wrong, where there are forces outside of pressure, we're dealing with political turmoil and financial, and just the messiness of making things happen. But it's getting the execution right that we think is key. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a deep breath and hold your breath for me. Okay. So you've probably now been holding your breath for about 10 seconds. This is fairly easy. As I'm starting to talk, what I'd like you to do is hold your breath for as long as you can. Now we're starting to get to about 20 seconds. Your body is uncomfortably aware that it's not breathing properly. Round about now, a couple of people start to have to take a breath. You're starting to get to 30 seconds. It's now starting to get uncomfortable. If you're hands up, who's still holding their breath now? Okay. If you're still holding your breath now, your body is becoming increasingly aware that there is something going wrong. All of a sudden, your attention is on your lungs. Your attention is on oxygen. It will get more and more and more painful. The point from now where you have to breathe is often when the pain and the discomfort gets too much. You can breathe now if you want. But the one thing I guarantee you is you've probably thought about oxygen more in the last minute than you probably have in the last year. And we breathe all the time. So why in the last minute did we think about oxygen much, much more than we normally do? Because something went wrong with the supply. And one of the things I actually find quite sad is how many frontline staff routinely talk about money. They routinely talk about cuts. They'll quote about budget cuts. They'll quote about the budget for their department. You think, well, you know, having spent a lot of my time around, you know, pre-registration students and nurses, people don't talk about money generally when they go into health. And then what happens is they get into an environment where it's talked about all the time. And it's the imbalance of money, I think, that's the problem. It's like when there's not enough oxygen, then your lungs start going on, and suddenly it becomes the focus, and suddenly your whole body is interested in oxygen. And I think that's what happens with clinical staff. These days I met a lot of clinical staff, and automatically they're saying money's a problem, and there is no money, and there is no money, and they're being told there's no money. Simply because there's an imbalance. So if we get our thoughts right around money, then I think we can do some really amazing things. And no matter how bad we think the situation now in the NHS is, these will become the good old days in about 3 years' time. This is the government's own forecast around spending and around the amount of money coming in. And we're in austerity now, and the deficit's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And people are talking about quite eye-watering reductions in spending around health and around education and around, you know, social care and so on. And as these cuts start to bite, then there's more and more attention focused on money. And yet, when we ask people what liberated you to do innovation, money wasn't even in the top 5. So there's this weird imbalance between the focus of money, the reaction around money, and the culture. And I think, broadly speaking, there's 4 things you can do to something. You can make it better, or you can make it worse, you can make it cost more, or you can get it cheaper. And I think the days of innovation being around things costing more and being better, I think are gone. They may come back in the future. I can remember 5, 6 years ago, there was quite a lot of money. You could have an idea and you get a couple of million here and a couple of million here and 10 million here to do some really interesting projects. I think now that's gone. I think the real game in town is around cheaper and better. Because the alternative to cheaper and better is cheaper and worse. And we know what this looks like. You know, we've been around that. But the idea that says things can be cheaper and better is actually, this is an amazingly receptive time because people are desperate and they're really afraid that things are going to get cheaper and worse. So for us, I think our model is that says there's 4 things you need to get right to make clinical innovation happen. Ideas are important, but all too often I see people have a great idea and it's really unclear what the problem is that they're trying to address. And I see a lot of solutions in search of a problem. So saying to people, what's the really, really crux of this problem? Come up with a really, really great solution, but that's not enough. This side is great if you can get it, but you need there to be a decent business model. And really that business model needs to be around freeing up cash to someone. And then you need to make it happen. And I think it's the right-hand side of this that actually gets a lot less attention. There's a huge focus on the left, but to be honest, we kind of know how to do that. We know how to do problem, we know how to do idea generation. I think it's the business models and the execution. And particularly giving frontline staff the language to talk about that convincingly, that makes a really big difference. So how does NurseFirst work? Well, in a nutshell, we find the potential. We find the oddballs. We find the mavericks. We find the deviants. We find the people who've got the personality and the potential to keep going in the face of repeated knockbacks. And actually, we're not particularly interested in skills. You know, so we've now run 2 cohorts. We've had people 3 months after qualifying as a professional, and we've had people 2 years off retirement. We've had people from band 5 to people to band 8. We've had people with master's degrees, and we've had people with, no academic qualifications. And those things don't really matter that much in terms of innovation. What is important is that you have someone who, when they get knocked back, doesn't just go, well, I tried and that's that. It goes, okay, we'll try a different way, that they've got that kind of personal resilience. You find those people, you get them to think really hard about what the problem is, and you expose them to some really amazing thinkers. And we do that in the UK, and we do it abroad through electronic means, and we get people exposed to all sorts of really, really innovative ideas. And then they generate the possibilities. And I think this is where it starts to get interesting. And we're very explicit that we say there's 3 different types of innovation, and any one of them's fine. This is, on the far left, is the very first ever Coke bottle. That was the very first ever commercial bottle of Coca-Cola. In the middle is the variation from the very first one to the modern Coke bottle. And then we have Pepsi. It's fine to be the first person to think of selling sugared water in a bottle to people. That's great. Equally, it's great if you're on the 3rd version of something and you want to make it the 5th version and you want to make it incrementally better. That's great. And equally, it's great if you go, do you know what? Someone over there is making a fortune selling sugared water. I think we could sell sugared water. All of those are really valuable types of innovation, because when you start talking about clinical innovation, the receiving end of every single one of those is someone getting better care, is someone getting better support, is someone leading a better life, is someone having less pain, is someone having a better childbirth, is someone who's able to stay in education, is someone who's able to have a peaceful death. They don't really care which one of these we go for. And all of these are really valid in terms of innovation. The other thing we really, really focus hard on, and you'll have seen it in the posters, is we get people to create costed business plans. Because I think if you just go to someone and go, I've got a great idea, and they're already under pressure and they're trying to make huge savings, if you say it's a costed business plan and it's going to save you money, then all of a sudden you start to bridge that language gap, which I think is the heart of the gap between boards and frontline staff. They just speak different languages. They use different terminology. They don't really understand each other's culture and ways of talking. So what we found is, and we've actually got, so you'll have received one of these. Well, this is our first evaluation of the first 2 years of NurseFirst, and we've pulled together some of the qualitative and quantitative data. And some of the interesting things is the business plans that have been generated so far. Those business plans create detailed plans for generating 1.2 million savings over 3 years on average, each person. And one of the things initially, there's an initial reaction. Those on the programme will recognise when we first started to talk about money, there's like an uncomfortableness, and some of it just sounds like science fiction. Because people live in a world where they go, there's no money, you can't have any post-it stickers, you can't have any wipes, you can't have any overtime, there's absolutely nothing, there is absolutely no money. And then we tell people that they can save £1 million, and they're like, this just sounds made up. And then you bring it down to a human level, and you go, well, actually, one acute hospital admission prevented every day, it saves £1 million. The average cost of a hospital admission is about £3,000. Once you start adding the health economic skills into it, and you go, this is what outpatients cost, this is what A&E attendants cost, this is what ambulance journeys, this is what admissions, then often most really great clinical ideas keep people out of hospital, stop them going back in, help them being managed better in their own home, start using less medication. And so suddenly you capture, and you saw it, I thought, beautifully with the presentations earlier, they capture the connecting with the human story and the human suffering, and that this is what it could look like if it was sorted, and here's a fairly compelling business model. So I think that's part of the magic sauce that we seem to have we've created. And again, you look at these things which said, okay, these were the things that are really important in people taking innovation forward. We've actually been doing some metric analysis, and we've said, okay, we can actually measure the personal impact in people on the NurseFirst programme. Compared to average NHS clinicians, NurseFirst cohort are dramatically less likely to say, we haven't got the skills and knowledge to innovate. They go, yeah, we do have the skills and knowledge. They're dramatically less likely to say, we have difficulty accessing senior managers. They know how to get hold of senior managers. Some of them stalk them in the car park. Some of them find out the pub they go to. Some of them start buying chocolates for their secretaries. They don't take they're busy and there's no way of getting in the diary. And they don't identify lack of funding as a barrier, because they know there's lots of money out there. And often it's just convincing people in a fairly convincing way that your idea will save the money. So we can measure the impact, but qualitatively and quantitatively, that says this is what the programme does for people. And we deal with the messiness of execution, because execution is not easy. And there's a lot of people, I think, who think that success is, yeah, here's a plan, and you go from here and here and here, and we've got Gantt charts, and you go milestone 1 and milestone 7, and then at the end of it, it all works. That's not how execution happens. Execution happens in this weird blobby mess, and sometimes you take 2 steps forward, and then you take 3 steps back, and then you get knocked back, and then you get rejected, and then you find a commissioner who does a really great job, and then they get sacked, or clinical commissioning groups go, and all sorts of weird and wonderful things happen. And we embrace the messiness of execution, and we help people through that programme, not only through the programme itself, but through the coaches. And we've got some of the coaches here, but the coaching relationship is really key to dealing with just that whole personal messiness of things going on in people's lives and their organisations. So I wanted to kind of end with our vision, because I think for us, the NurseFirst programme is really about the impact that we're looking to have on health. And I think that's certainly part of the compelling vision that brought all of the partners on board originally. So I kind of like to think of the analogy that each member, each person who goes to the NurseFirst programme is this ripened apple fruit. And it's great producing fruit, but if at the end of the day we just go, we developed some people and it was great, then I think we've lost a huge opportunity, and I think we've done a disservice to all the people with all the problems out there. So for us it's like, okay, the individual bits of fruit are important, but it's when you start collecting them, when we start amassing piles of fruit, that something then starts to happen. So we're planning to scale the programme, and also then to start getting the different alumni working together, so you start to create a movement for change. So the NurseFirst programme becomes part of the person's journey, and these people are changed from this moment on. And then when it gets really, really interesting, is those bits of fruit then start to trigger other bits of fruit. And my vision is that in the future you've got people who go, oh, I've got a problem in my area. And they go, why don't you talk to these 3 people? Because they did the NurseFirst programme. And they start disseminating skills, they disseminate ideas, and they coach people. And they help people through all that messiness. And I think it's when you get to this kind of stage that you really start to create systematic change across the whole health system and across health innovation. I would again like to thank all our partners. The Shaftesbury Partnership wouldn't have been able to do any of this without the support of Johnson & Johnson, Q&I and the Buxton University, and it's been kind of a real honour having the 4 organisations working together to achieve some really quite amazing results. And if you want to find out any more, that's our website. So I would like to kind of bring the programme to an end, and I'd like to thank you so much, not only for coming, but for the support that many of you have given to people on the programme, which has been incredibly valuable. And I really hope this has been a good day and left you with lots of food for thought and some really interesting connections. Thank you so much.